What if every dream you have ever had was trying to tell you something? What if the strange images, the impossible places, the people who appear and vanish were not random at all, but messages from the deepest part of your mind? And what if the question you have never quite asked yourself is this: why does my brain create entire worlds when I am not awake to control them? Dreams do not rise from the outside. They rise from within. From your history, from your emotions, from the patterns your mind has carried silently through years of living. They rise from experiences you forgot, from moments you didn't fully feel, from the long tail of memory that follows you into the night. When you close your eyes, the world disappears, but the mind does not. It reconfigures itself. It enters its own terrain. Take a slow breath in. Let it fall gently out, not as an instruction, but as an invitation. The mind listens differently when the body softens. The edges of awareness become more fluid, more open to exploring the interior world. Dreams have been with humanity since the beginning, before writing, before science, before philosophy, before language shaped the mind into linear thoughts. People looked to dreams for guidance, for warning, for connection, for meaning. In caves, in deserts, in temples, in villages, in the earliest myths that humans ever told, dreams appeared as messengers from gods, ancestors, spirits, or the earth itself. They were seen as portals to other realms, bridges between the living and the unseen, glimpses into truths too large for the waking mind to hold. And yet, as scientific understanding deepened across centuries, something remarkable happened. The more researchers learned about the brain, the more they realized that dreams were not primitive illusions. They were sophisticated processes, necessary, vital, deeply rooted in biology. Dreams are the brain's oldest form of storytelling, not entertainment, but survival. Neuroscience reveals that dreams help regulate emotion, stabilize memory, integrate difficult experiences, rehearse threats, refine motor skills, and support creativity. Psychology shows how dreams reflect unresolved conflict, unexpressed feelings, archetypal patterns, and symbolic narratives shaped by the unconscious mind. Anthropology reveals how dream motifs echo across cultures, linking people who never met, never shared the same language, yet somehow dream the same symbols. Philosophy suggests that dreams may hold clues to the nature of consciousness itself, what it means to experience, to imagine, to be. What makes dreams extraordinary is that they blur all boundaries. They're both biological and emotional, both psychological and symbolic, both ancient and deeply personal, both mysterious and measurable. Tonight, you will travel across all of these layers. You will step into the shifting rhythms of sleep. You will explore the architecture of REM and non-REM, the cycles that open the gates to dreaming. You will witness how the brain creates worlds without light, without sound, without external input. You will see how memory, emotion, and imagination collide and reorganize themselves. You will feel the symbolic mind awaken, the part of you that speaks in images instead of words. You will explore fear, desire, and the shadow self, the emotional undercurrents that shape the dream world. You will walk through the myths of ancient cultures, how different societies interpreted the same universal inner phenomena. You will enter the realm of nightmares and trauma, the mind's attempts to process pain. You will witness how dreams and creativity are intertwined, how insight can emerge from the quiet darkness of sleep. You will explore philosophical reflections on consciousness and reality. And finally, you will glimpse the future of dream science decoding algorithms, neural imaging, and the coming era of mind mapping technology. As you listen, notice how your mind responds. Notice how certain ideas resonate, how certain images linger. Dreams have a way of revealing what the waking mind overlooks. Let your breath soften again. Allow your awareness to settle like dust drifting downward in a quiet room. There is no rush. Dreams unfold slowly, and so will this journey. Inside every dream you have ever had, there is a trail of meaning, emotion, and memory woven into scenes that may feel strange, but are never accidental. Your mind has reasons for everything it creates, even the things you cannot understand at first glance. Tonight, we begin the exploration of that inner world, the landscape of the sleeping mind. The landscape of the sleeping mind is not a silent place. It is not empty. It is not still. It is a hidden world within you, built from shifting electrical storms, flowing waves of activity, ancient survival circuits, emotional memories, and the deep biological intelligence that has guided human life for millions of years. When you fall asleep, you do not disappear. You enter a different dimension of your own consciousness, a dimension with its own rules, its own physics, its own logic, its own language. To understand dreams, we must begin by understanding this terrain, the vast inner world that awakens only when the outer world fades. As the day ends and your eyes grow heavy, the brain starts preparing for a transition. Waking consciousness runs on a fast, high-frequency rhythm called beta waves. They keep you alert, responsive, aware of your surroundings. But the moment you begin to relax, those waves start to slow. Beta shifts to alpha, a softer rhythm, one that comes with calm focus, meditation, the beginning of inward attention. If you close your eyes and take a single slow breath, you can feel the edge of this shift. The mind pulls away from the outer world just a little. As you drift further, the brain releases its grip on sensory input. Visual processing loosens. Auditory processing softens. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for self-control, planning, and narrative structure, begins to quiet. It does not turn off. It simply steps back. It loosens the reins of consciousness. And that loosening is what allows the inner world to rise. In this early stage of sleep, consciousness becomes porous. Thoughts flicker between waking and dreaming. You may see shapes, patterns, lights, or fragments of faces behind your closed eyes. These are hypnagogic images, the flickering sparks of the dream world preparing its entrance. They do not yet form stories, but they carry the raw material from which dreams will later grow. This moment, the threshold between waking and sleep, is one of the most mysterious transitions in the human experience. If you pay attention during this stage, you may feel like you are floating. You may feel your body soften, expand, or shift in space. You may feel like you are falling gently inward. This is the mind releasing its anchor to the physical body. Motor neurons quiet down. Muscles relax. Awareness begins to detach from the physical form. The landscape of sleep opens like a door into a dimly lit world. The first stage of non-REM sleep is light, delicate. The brain hovers between external attention and internal wandering. Thoughts become disjointed, fluid, drifting. You are still faintly aware of the room around you, but your mind is drifting behind the scenes. This stage is a bridge, and like all bridges, it connects two worlds. As the brain moves deeper, something extraordinary happens. Neurons begin firing in slow, synchronized waves. These slow waves are one of the great mysteries of sleep. They sweep across the cortex like rhythmic tides, clearing space in neural networks, strengthening essential memories, weakening irrelevant ones, stabilizing emotional traces left behind from the day. It is as if the mind begins washing itself clean, preparing the internal environment for the dreaming to come. In these deeper stages of non-REM, consciousness changes its shape again. You are no longer simply drifting. You are sinking into the internal landscape, moving away from the surface of awareness and into the quiet architecture of the unconscious. The brain stops monitoring the outside world. Instead, it begins processing the inside world, the world of memory, feeling, and experience. During this stage, the hippocampus, the brain's memory librarian, becomes highly active. It gathers fragments of the day conversations, images, emotions, details you noticed without realizing, and prepares them for storage. The cortex, where long-term memories live, becomes receptive, ready to absorb the impressions being delivered. Sleep researchers describe this process as memory consolidation. But that phrase does not capture the strangeness of what is happening. It is not simply storage, it is transformation. Experiences are reorganized, reweighted, emotional tones adjusted, connections strengthened or dissolved. The brain is rewriting your internal narrative for the sake of clarity, stability, and survival. This rewriting is one of the reasons dreams later feel so symbolic, so metaphorical, so emotionally charged. Dream imagery rises from the very place where the brain is reshaping experience. Breathe softly, not as direction, but as an echo of the rhythm that the brain itself enters. Slow waves, slow breath, the inner world moving at a different pace. As the night deepens, non-REM cycles become longer. The brain spends long stretches in this slow wave state, recalibrating, reorganizing, restoring. During these stages, dreaming is minimal faint flashes of thought, impressionistic scenes without structure, emotional waves without imagery. But these stages are essential. They build the scaffolding upon which REM dreams will later bloom. Think of non-REM as the foundation. Think of REM as the cathedral that rises from it. Before REM begins, the brain must complete its early nightly tasks. It must perform its quiet housekeeping. The metabolic waste of waking thought is flushed. Neural pathways are cleared. Emotional tensions begin to untangle. The brain prepares the stage for creativity, symbolism, and emotional processing. And then, suddenly, the rhythm changes. The slow waves of non-REM sleep begin to break apart. Electrical activity shifts. The cortex lights up. The thalamus, the brain's sensory gateway, starts firing in fast bursts. The brainstem triggers a paralysis in the muscles, preventing the body from acting out what the mind is about to create. The heart rate quickens. Breathing becomes shallow. The eyes begin darting beneath the lids. This is REM, the stage where dreaming awakens in full force. But before we reach REM, we stay here, in the quiet landscape of the sleeping mind, this world of soft waves, deep restoration, and silent neural work. Because understanding this terrain is essential. It is the soil from which every dream grows. It is in these slow, deep cycles that the body heals, the mind stabilizes, and the inner world prepares its canvas. Dreams do not emerge from chaos. They emerge from this ordered, rhythmic, quietly intelligent landscape. Sleep is the oldest therapy the mind has. The first medicine, the first emotional refuge, the first storyteller, the first mirror. The landscape of the sleeping mind is vast, and we have only just stepped into it. REM and non-REM, the rhythms and architecture of dreaming. Sleep is not one experience. It is a cycle, A choreography, a continuous shifting between two primary states that shape the entire architecture of the night. Non-REM and REM, restoration and creation, depth and intensity, stillness and storm. These two states work together like alternating currents, each carrying out essential functions that allow the mind not only to survive but to flourish. To understand dreams, you must understand this rhythm, because dreams are born from the interplay between these two worlds. The night begins with non-REM. It always begins with descent. The brain eases itself downward through 3 stages, each one deeper than the last. The first stage is light, fragile, like stepping from a bright room into a dimly lit hallway. The mind is not yet fully asleep. You are still close to the surface of awareness. Sounds can pull you back. Thoughts drift and dissolve. Muscles twitch as the brain begins to decouple from the body. This stage lasts only a few minutes, but it marks the first shift of consciousness. As the brain moves into the second stage of non-REM, the rhythm changes. Electrical activity forms sleep spindles, short bursts of rapid firing and K-complexes, large waves that ripple through the cortex. These are the brain's way of protecting sleep. Spindles guard the mind from waking too easily. They stabilize the fragile boundary between outer and inner worlds. During this stage, the body temperature drops. The heart slows. The brain becomes more insulated. You drift deeper into an internal landscape. But it is the third stage of non-REM, often called slow-wave sleep, that carries profound importance. This is the deepest form of unconsciousness the brain enters naturally. Neurons fire in long, slow synchrony, like a crowd breathing as one. It is during this stage that the body performs its most essential biological repairs. Tissue rebuilds, immune function strengthens, growth hormone is released, energy reserves are restored. And within the brain, perhaps the most vital process of all takes place: memory consolidation. If you imagine the hippocampus as a temporary storage unit, this is the moment when it empties its shelves into the cortex, transferring the short-term experiences of the day into long-term structure. Without slow-wave sleep, memory becomes unstable and fragmented. Emotional impressions linger without clarity. Learning fails to take root. The mind becomes unanchored, as if every new day washes away pieces of the day before. In this deep stage, dreaming exists, but only faintly. These early non-REM dreams are impressionistic, muted, often emotion-heavy rather than visually detailed. They may feel like distant echoes, like wandering through fog with no clear shapes. These non-REM dreams hold emotional residue more than narrative. They are the subconscious, sorting what needs to be felt, what needs to be softened, what needs to be placed aside. They have no cinematic quality yet, because the brain is focused on restoration. This phase is the night's groundwork. But when non-REM loosens its hold, when the brain has dipped into depth and completed its early tasks, something dramatic happens. A shift begins, subtle at first. Slow waves begin to break apart. Neural activity rises. Blood flow increases. The body becomes still, unnaturally still. Atonia, the paralysis of REM sleep, takes hold, a biological safeguard preventing the body from acting out dreams. And then, almost like a spark catching a hidden fuse, the brain ignites. This is REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the theater of dreaming. In REM, the brain becomes one of the most active organs in the entire body. The electrical activity looks almost identical to wakefulness. The visual cortex brightens. The auditory cortex hums. The emotional centers, especially the amygdala, become intensely active, giving dreams their emotional weight, their immediacy, their vividness. And the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, reasoning, and inhibition, goes quiet. Without it, the mind becomes fluid, non-linear, imaginative, unbounded. It is in this state that the brain gains freedom to create without constraint. REM is the mind without gravity. Scenes shift, identities blur, places morph, time stretches or collapses. The brain is experimenting with itself, running simulations, exploring emotional landscapes, testing possibilities, processing trauma, playing with imagination. Each REM cycle allows the mind to perform different psychological functions: emotional healing, creativity, integration of past with present, rehearsal of future threats, exploration of desires and fears. REM is the mind in motion. The eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids, not because they are seeing external light, but because the brain is following internal imagery. The brainstem activates the oculomotor circuits, making the eyes track the dream as if tracking a real scene. This is why REM is sometimes called paradoxical sleep. The body rests, but the mind awakens into its own universe. REM cycles begin short, only a few minutes in the first cycle of the night. But as the hours pass, REM periods lengthen. By the early morning hours, REM episodes may last 45 minutes or more, creating long, layered dreams with narrative depth. These early morning dreams, saturated with emotion and imagery, are the ones people most often remember. They have structure, characters, symbolism, emotional arcs. They feel like being inside a film woven from memory and imagination. But the night is not linear. It cycles. Non-REM, REM, non-REM, REM. Over and over, like tides shaping the shore. Each cycle lasts around 90 minutes, though the exact duration varies. Across a typical night, the mind will move through 4 to 6 full cycles, each one deepening the emotional and symbolic work of dreaming. Non-REM anchors. REM expands. Non-REM restores. REM transforms. Without non-REM, dreams lose coherence. Without REM, emotions lose integration. Both are essential. Both shape the texture of your inner world. This cycle is ancient. Every mammal capable of dreaming carries this rhythm. It is woven into the fabric of life itself. The architecture of sleep predates civilization, predates language, predates human consciousness as we know it. Long before humans created mythologies about dreams, the biology of dreaming was already evolving in the brains of early mammals, honing itself for survival. Threat simulation, emotional recovery, memory refinement, creative problem solving. Dreams are not an accident of sleep. They are the purpose of sleep. If you were to place electrodes across the skull during the night, you would see these patterns unfold like a cosmic ballet. Slow waves of non-REM ebbing and flowing, then sudden bursts of REM ignition. Calm, then storm. Depth, then vividness. It is in this constant dance that the brain processes the experiences of life. This architecture also explains why dreams change throughout the night. Early dreams are simple, fragmented, emotional. Later dreams are complex, symbolic, narrative. As REM expands in the later hours, the brain gives itself more time to explore emotional themes, more time to simulate scenarios, more time to weave meaning into imagery. The most profound dreams often come just before waking, when the sleeping mind is most open, most fluid, and most connected to the subconscious. This rhythmic alternation continues until the final cycle of the night. Gradually, REM lightens. The prefrontal cortex begins to stir. Awareness of the external world begins to seep in. Dream imagery grows unstable. The inner world begins to flicker. And eventually, the threshold reverses. You rise from the internal world back to the external one. If you wake gently, you may catch the last fragments of your dream. If you wake suddenly, the dream may shatter in an instant. The rhythms of REM and non-REM form the heartbeat of the dreaming mind. They create the structure within which imagination, memory, and emotion weave together. They are the pulse of the inner world. In these oscillations, the mind finds balance. In these cycles, it finds clarity. In these waves, it finds the space to heal, to feel, to remember, to release. Dreaming is the consciousness beneath consciousness, and it grows from this nightly architecture, this ancient rhythm that has carried the human mind through every night of life. The biology of imagery. How the brain creates worlds without sensory input. The moment dreaming begins, the brain becomes a universe builder. It generates landscapes, faces, voices, colors, textures, and emotions without a single photon of light, without a single vibration of sound, without any external input from the world. This ability to create full sensory reality from within is one of the most profound features of human consciousness. Dreaming reveals something extraordinary. The brain does not need the outside world to experience a world. It can simulate reality on its own. To understand how dream imagery forms, we must first understand something fundamental about perception. The brain does not directly experience the world. It interprets signals. Light hits the retina, but the image you see is constructed inside the visual cortex. Sound enters the ear, but the experience of hearing happens in the auditory cortex. Touch, smell, taste, all of these senses are built internally. The brain is always generating the experience of reality, even when the input comes from outside. Dreaming shows us the other half of this truth. When the external input disappears, the brain continues generating. It continues constructing. Without sensory signals, it becomes free to create reality from memory, imagination, and emotion alone. Dreams are the purest form of perception, unanchored from the physical world. When REM sleep begins, the visual cortex activates intensely. It lights up in patterns that look almost identical to wakeful perception. The brain uses the same regions it uses to see the world during the day. Yet the eyes are closed. The room is dark. No light reaches the retina. The images come from within. The occipital lobe at the back of the brain becomes a projection screen, but instead of reflecting the outside world, it draws from the internal archive memories, fragments of faces, pieces of places, emotional coloration, symbolic forms. The brain has access to every image you have ever seen, every texture you have ever touched, every space you have ever walked through. It samples from this vast library and recombines material into new scenes. This is why dream imagery feels both familiar and strange. The brain rarely invents something completely new. Instead, it blends what it already knows. A street from childhood merges with a room from years later. A stranger's face carries the eyes of someone you once met for only a moment. A place you have never been feels eerily recognizable. This blending is not random. It reflects the associative architecture of the brain, how memories are linked by meaning, emotion, similarity, or contrast. The hippocampus plays a central role in this process. It retrieves fragments of memory, but not necessarily full or accurate ones. The brain does not replay experiences, it reconstructs them. The hippocampus sends fragments, a corridor, a scent, a sound, a face to the cortex, where the dream assembles itself like a collage. The cortex, especially the visual and sensory regions, takes these fragments and builds immersive scenes. But what guides the selection of fragments? Emotion. The amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, is highly active during REM. It helps determine the tone, intensity, and emotional color of dream imagery. If the amygdala activates fear circuits, the dream will darken. Hallways will lengthen. Shadows will deepen. Figures will distort. If the emotional tone is curiosity or desire or longing, the dream will shift accordingly. The brain builds imagery that matches the emotional state it is processing. This emotional influence is why dreams can feel meaningful, even when the content is surreal. The brain is not trying to tell a literal story. It is expressing an emotional truth in symbolic language, using imagery as its medium. A collapsing bridge may represent insecurity. A locked door might represent a barrier within the self. A familiar childhood place may arise when the brain is integrating early emotional memories. The imagery is not chosen for its realism, but for its resonance with the underlying emotional context. REM also activates the parietal lobes, which help generate the sense of space. Dreams feel three-dimensional, with depth, distance, and direction, because the brain activates the same spatial networks it uses while awake. Even though you are lying still, your dream self walks, runs, climbs, falls, floats, or moves through complex environments. This spatial simulation is so vivid that the body must be paralyzed during REM to prevent movement. Without atonia, you would act out dreams physically. The somatosensory cortex, responsible for touch and bodily sensations, also activates during REM. This is why you can feel textures, pressure, warmth, cold, floating, falling, or even pain inside a dream. The brain stimulates the same circuits that generate bodily sensation while awake. But instead of using signals from the nerves, it uses internal activation patterns. The result is a convincing simulation of touch. The auditory cortex participates as well. Voices arise, music appears, environmental sounds echo through dream scenes. The brain recreates auditory experiences from memory and emotional tone. When someone in a dream speaks, the voice is generated entirely within the auditory processing regions. The same circuits used to hear others during the day are used to create sound at night. Even smell and taste, though rarer in dreams, come from activation of the olfactory and gustatory regions. These senses are strongly tied to memory, which is why their occasional appearance in dreams can feel intensely vivid. A childhood scent, a familiar food, a place defined by its smell. These moments arise when the brain accesses deeper or more emotionally charged memories. But the most striking element of dream imagery is how fluid it is. Scenes change without warning. Identities shift. Objects transform. The environment dissolves and reforms. This fluidity is not random. It arises because the prefrontal cortex is deactivated during REM. This region is responsible for logic, continuity, and the enforcement of physical rules. When it quiets, the dream is not bound by the laws of reality. The brain is free to create symbolic transitions, metaphoric environments, non-linear narratives. Dream imagery is guided by association, emotion, and symbolic meaning rather than logic. The dream mind thinks in pictures, not in sentences. It communicates in metaphor, not argument. It processes emotion through imagery, not language. This is why dreams feel ineffable. They come from a mode of consciousness older than rational thought. The brain, in this state, becomes a painter, a composer, a storyteller, a filmmaker, a symbolic interpreter, a healer, a scientist running simulations, a child playing with imagination, a philosopher exploring the nature of reality. All of these roles unfold simultaneously. Dream imagery is both ancient and immediate, both deeply personal and universally human, both mysterious and scientifically traceable. It shows us something profound. The mind does not wait for the world to create meaning. It creates meaning from within, even in darkness, even in silence, even in sleep, memory and emotion. Why dreams blend past experiences with inner feelings. Memory is not a recording. It is not a perfect archive stored on shelves inside the brain. Memory is alive. It is constantly being rewritten, reorganized, reshaped by emotion, context, and time. Every experience you have ever lived shifts and changes each time it is recalled. And at night, during sleep, this entire living system becomes even more fluid. Dreams emerge from this fluidity, from memory being processed and emotion being integrated, from the subconscious weaving the past into symbolic, emotional narratives that help you understand the present. To understand why dreams feel so personal, so emotional, so strangely relevant, even when their imagery makes no logical sense, we must begin with the architecture of memory itself. At the core of memory lies the hippocampus. This structure, shaped like a curled seahorse, sits deep in the temporal lobe and acts as a temporary holding space for new experiences. Everything that happens to you in the day, the conversations, the small observations, the feelings you did not fully acknowledge, the moments of stress or joy passes through the hippocampus. But it does not stay there. The brain cannot rely on the hippocampus as permanent storage. It is too vulnerable, too small, too dynamic. Instead, the hippocampus acts like a librarian, sorting new books before placing them into the vast library of the cortex. The cortex holds long-term memories, woven into networks that stretch across millions of neurons. Transferring new experiences from the hippocampus into the cortex is not a simple process. It is not linear, not rational, not straightforward. It happens during sleep, and dreams are the living byproduct of that process. When you sleep, the hippocampus begins to replay the traces of your day. Not perfectly, not literally. It replays fragments, the emotional tone of a conversation, a glance from someone you care about, a moment of frustration, an unresolved worry, a piece of a memory from years ago that somehow feels linked to something that happened today. These fragments are sent out into the cortex, where they are compared, connected, reorganized, and integrated into your long-term memory. But here is the key. Emotion determines what the brain prioritizes. The amygdala, the brain's emotional amplifier, does not sleep lightly. It stays highly active during REM, guiding which memories rise to the surface and which pieces are stitched together. This is why dreams often feel emotionally saturated, even when their content seems bizarre. The dream is not replaying life literally, it is replaying emotion symbolically. Emotion is the glue of memory. Emotion decides what matters. Emotion decides what the dream will focus on. If something during the day bothered you, but you didn't fully process it, it may appear in the dream in metaphorical form. A harsh conversation becomes a storm. A feeling of vulnerability becomes a dream of losing something precious. A conflict you avoided becomes a chase. A desire you didn't acknowledge becomes a dream of reaching for something glowing, fleeting, or forbidden. Dreams do not show you events. They show you meaning, the emotional meaning beneath the events. During non-REM sleep, memories are transferred quietly with little imagery. But during REM, when the brain becomes vivid, emotional, symbolic, the integration of memory becomes artistic. The brain does not simply categorize experiences. It creates scenes, narratives, metaphors, dream sequences to work through emotional material. Imagine the hippocampus sending a memory to the cortex. But the cortex does not simply file it away. It compares it to decades of other memories. It looks for similarities, contrasts, unresolved threads, emotional echoes. These associations create the content of dreams. A dream about being back in your childhood home may not be about the house at all. It may be about a feeling that arose during the day, vulnerability, nostalgia, fear of loss that reminded the brain of earlier emotional patterns. The dream uses the home as a symbol because the memory network for that emotion is tied to that place. A dream of losing your footing, falling, or being unable to move may not be about danger. It may arise from feelings of uncertainty or lack of control in waking life. The brain translates these feelings into sensory metaphors because imagery is the fastest way for the sleeping mind to express emotion. A dream about someone you have not seen in years may appear not because you thought of them, but because an emotion you felt recently resembled an emotion connected to that person. The dream reconnects the threads. Dreams blend past and present because the brain processes memory by association, not chronology. Time does not matter inside a dream. Emotional relevance does. This is why a dream can shift effortlessly between childhood and adulthood. Between familiar places and imagined ones, the brain is not confused. It is efficient. It draws connections according to emotional logic. Emotion drives memory. Memory shapes dreams. Dreams reflect emotion. This cycle continues through every REM phase of the night. Each REM episode, especially the long ones in the early morning, allows the brain to revisit emotional challenges, reorganize them, and create symbolic narratives around them. When trauma is involved, the process becomes even more intense. The brain attempts to re-experience painful material in a safe, symbolic form, trying again and again to integrate what could not be felt fully in waking life. Nightmares often arise here, emotional processing pushed to its emotional limits. But dreams are not only about pain, they are about learning. Dreams integrate new skills, new insights, new experiences. A musician may dream of playing melodies that never existed. A scientist may dream of patterns or breakthroughs. A person learning a new skill may dream of performing it with ease. In these dreams, the hippocampus is rehearsing, strengthening neural pathways, and weaving new experiences into the self. This is why dreams sometimes feel like lessons, why they feel like warnings, why they feel like messages, why they feel like the mind speaking in symbols rather than words. Emotion and memory are the ingredients. Dreams are the synthesis. The sleeping brain is not passive. It is engaged in deep psychological work. While the body rests, the mind reorganizes the story of your life. Memories are not archived quietly, they are transformed. Emotional meaning is updated. New patterns form. Old patterns soften. Dreams are the visible surface of that invisible work. You wake each morning slightly different, slightly updated, slightly more coherent than the day before. Dreams are one of the ways the brain makes you whole again. The symbolic mind, archetypes, metaphors, and the language of imagination. The dreaming mind does not speak in sentences. It speaks in symbols. This is one of the most important truths about dreams and one of the easiest to overlook. When you dream, the mind shifts into an ancient mode of expression, a mode that predates language, logic, and rational thought. It communicates through images, patterns, and metaphors, because this is the original language of the human nervous system. Long before humans spoke words, they thought in images. Dreaming preserves that ancestral form of cognition. Symbols arise because the unconscious mind has no direct access to language. It cannot speak to you with grammar or linear narrative. Instead, it uses imagery to express emotional truths. A symbol is not a code to be deciphered with a dictionary. It is a felt experience, an emotional idea wrapped in imagery. To understand the symbolic mind, imagine the brain as a vast network of associations. Every memory, emotion, and thought is connected to thousands of others. When the prefrontal cortex quiets during REM sleep, the rational filters dissolve, allowing these associations to flow freely. Symbols emerge from the strongest emotional and psychological patterns in this network. A dream symbol is not arbitrary. It is the brain's attempt to represent something intangible, a feeling, a fear, a desire, a conflict, a memory using visual form. A house may symbolize the self. A journey may symbolize personal transformation. A shadowy figure may symbolize an aspect of yourself you do not fully acknowledge. Light may symbolize clarity. Water may symbolize emotion. Fire may symbolize renewal or destruction. Distance may symbolize longing. Being chased may symbolize avoidance. Being lost may symbolize uncertainty. A locked door may symbolize a barrier inside you. The symbolic mind does not choose these images consciously. The brain draws from deeply rooted associations shared across cultures and across time archetypes. Archetypes are patterns of meaning that exist across human experience. They are the universal motifs found in myths, legends, religions, art, and stories. They also appear in dreams because they emerge from the shared structures of the human psyche. Carl Jung believed that archetypes live in the collective unconscious, a deep layer of mind inherited from countless generations. Modern neuroscience reframes this idea as evolutionarily coded emotional and cognitive patterns built in structures shaped by the survival needs of ancient humans. For example, the archetype of the shadow. The dark, unknown figure reflects the human instinct to fear what is hidden. The archetype of the wise guide reflects the need for mentorship and protection. The hero archetype reflects the drive for growth and mastery. These motifs appear in dreams not because the brain is referencing mythology, but because mythology itself arose from the same internal patterns that shape dreams. When you dream, your brain is tapping into these ancient structures, not consciously, not deliberately, instinctively. This is why dreams resonate even when they confuse you. They speak in the emotional language of the species. The symbolic mind is not interested in literal truth. It is interested in emotional truth. If you feel insecure, the dream may not show you insecurity. It may show you a collapsing floor or a sinking boat. If you fear loss, the dream may not show you what you fear losing. It may show you trying to hold water in your hands. If you desire connection, the dream may not show you the person. It may show you warmth, light, open space. To the symbolic mind, these metaphors are precise. Dreams often create scenes that feel charged or significant because symbols carry layers of meaning. A hallway might be a transitional period in life. A mountain might be a challenge. A closed window might be an opportunity you feel you cannot reach. A newborn animal might represent vulnerability or potential. The symbolic mind communicates by combining emotional tone with imagery that resonates with that tone. This is why dream interpretation must always consider the dreamer, not a universal dictionary. Symbols arise from shared human structures, yes, but they are shaped by personal experience. Water symbolizes emotion universally, but for one person, it might represent comfort, and for another, fear. Childhood homes represent early foundations universally, but the emotional meaning depends entirely on what those years held. A crowded train may symbolize pressure for one person, loneliness for another, excitement for someone else. The symbolic mind uses universal patterns, but personal details. Symbolism in dreams is also fluid. An image may shift or transform because emotion is shifting. A staircase becomes a ladder becomes a cliff becomes a vast open sky. These transformations represent internal transitions, emotional movement, psychological change. The mind creates metaphors because metaphors are efficient. They compress complex emotional experiences into intuitive imagery. The symbolic mind does not need to explain your emotional truth, it shows you. And the dreamer feels the meaning intuitively, even if they cannot articulate it logically. But where does imaginative imagery come from? How does the brain create these symbolic scenes? The answer lies in the interaction of multiple systems. The hippocampus provides memory fragments. The amygdala provides emotional tone. The visual cortex creates vivid imagery. The parietal lobe constructs spatial environments. The default mode network weaves narrative flow. The limbic system charges everything with feeling. And the deactivated prefrontal cortex allows fluidity, metaphor, and nonlinear expression. The absence of logic is not a flaw. It is what allows symbolism to bloom. Because when logic is quiet, metaphor becomes the only language available. The symbolic mind expresses what the waking mind suppresses. It reveals fears we try to avoid. It reveals desires we are hesitant to admit. It reveals conflicts we do not yet understand consciously. It reveals truths we sense but cannot articulate. The dream is not hiding these truths. It is expressing them in the only way it can. Every dream symbol is a bridge between the conscious and unconscious self. Every image is a message written in emotional language. Every metaphor is a conversation between who you are and who you are becoming. The symbolic mind is ancient, expressive, and deeply wise in its own non-linear way. Dreams are not puzzles to be solved. They are mirrors. They show the inner landscape in imagery because imagery is how the deepest part of the mind thinks. To dream is to imagine without walls, to feel without filters, to perceive without rational constraints. It is the psyche speaking freely, using pictures instead of words. Understanding this symbolic language requires patience, openness, and curiosity, not analysis, not decoding, not rigid interpretation, but a sensitivity to emotional resonance and personal meaning. Because symbols are not abstractions, they are living parts of the self, rising to the surface when the world finally becomes quiet enough for them to be heard. Night and narrative. How the brain becomes a storyteller in sleep. When dreams unfold, they rarely begin with structure. They often start as fragments, images, sensations, or drifting impressions. A room with no walls, a sound with no source, a memory without context, a face half remembered, a feeling that seems to move through the dream before any scene appears. Yet, as the dream continues, these fragments begin to gather, merge, and take shape. The brain becomes a storyteller. It weaves narrative threads out of scattered pieces of memory, emotion, and imagination. This ability to create story from chaos is one of the most extraordinary features of the dreaming mind. To understand why dreams become narrative, you must understand how the brain constructs stories while awake. Human beings are storytelling organisms. We interpret the world through sequence and meaning. Even daily events are not experienced as raw data. The brain automatically organizes them into narratives. This happened because of that. That happened after this. This must mean something. Story is how the mind makes sense of life. The dreaming mind inherits this tendency, but expresses it in a freer, more fluid form. Without the constraints of logic or linear time, narrative becomes something more symbolic, emotional, and associative. But it remains narrative. Even the strangest dream has a sense of movement, a beginning, a shift, a climax, a feeling of resolution or awakening. This structure arises because the brain is always trying to organize experience into coherence, even when coherence is impossible. Several networks contribute to this dream storytelling process. The first is the default mode network, or DMN. This network becomes active when the mind is introspective, imaginative, or wandering the same network that lights up during daydreaming, creative thinking, or remembering the past. During REM sleep, the DMN becomes highly active, creating an internal flow of spontaneous thought, image, and association. But without the prefrontal cortex to impose logic, the DMN does not filter or correct itself. It simply moves, freely and intuitively, generating narrative pathways out of emotional and symbolic material. The second network is the limbic system, which contributes emotional arcs to the dream. The amygdala, hippocampus, and surrounding structures provide intensity, urgency, longing, fear, nostalgia, or hope. Because emotion shapes memory and meaning, the limbic system helps determine the direction of the dream's narrative. A dream driven by fear will create a sequence shaped by avoidance or pursuit. A dream driven by longing will create scenes shaped by searching or reaching. A dream driven by unresolved conflict will create tension and transformation. The third contributor is the sensory cortex. Even though the senses are shut off from outside input, the sensory regions activate internally, creating vivid sights, textures, sounds, and movement. These sensory details anchor the dream's narrative in a world that feels tangible, even when it is impossible. The visual cortex provides imagery. The motor cortex provides a sense of action. The parietal lobe provides spatial coherence. This allows the dream to unfold like a lived experience. But perhaps the most fascinating element of dream narrative is how the brain transitions between scenes. In waking life, a story must obey continuity. One event follows another, cause and effect. But the dreaming brain does not need continuity. It operates according to emotional logic. When the emotional tone of a dream shifts, the narrative shifts instantly. A room dissolves into a field. A friend becomes a stranger. A scene transforms into another without transition. These abrupt changes reflect shifts in emotion, memory activation, or symbolic meaning. The dream story moves like a river, changing course whenever the emotional current changes. This fluidity explains why dreams often feel more like experiences than stories. Narrative structure in dreams is not built through external plot, but through internal meaning. The brain is not telling you a story, it is letting you experience one. The dream is the subconscious exploring its own landscape, and narrative is the shape that exploration takes. But dreams also show a deep cognitive skill, the ability to weave disparate elements into something cohesive. During the day, your experiences are fragmented. You think about a friend while doing a task. You remember a childhood moment. You feel something unexpected. You imagine something unrelated. These pieces float in the mind with no connection. But during REM, the brain begins stitching them together. A recent event, an old memory, an unresolved emotion, and an imagined fear may merge into a single dream sequence. The dream becomes a narrative fusion of psychological threads. This merging is not accidental. It is how the brain integrates memory. When memories are woven into a narrative, they become more stable, more accessible, and less emotionally volatile. Dream storytelling is part of emotional regulation. It is part of learning. It is part of how the brain updates its internal model of the world. Children dream more vividly and more fantastically than adults because their brains are constantly building and adjusting this model. Their dream narratives are often wild, magical, exaggerated. The boundary between imagination and reality is thin. Adults retain this ability, but its expression becomes subtler. Yet, in REM sleep, the adult brain momentarily regains the imaginative freedom of childhood. It tells stories without rules. What does this reveal about the dreaming mind? It reveals that narrative is not a luxury. It is not entertainment. Narrative is a biological necessity. Stories help the brain understand emotion. Stories help the brain integrate memory. Stories help the brain prepare for the future. Stories help the brain practice survival strategies. Stories help the brain regulate fear, desire, and identity. Even stress dreams, being late, being chased, being unprepared, reflect the mind rehearsing emotional or cognitive challenges. Even dreams that seem random are shaped by psychological work happening beneath the surface. Dream narrative also allows experimentation. In dreams, the self becomes fluid. You may be yourself, yet not yourself. You may shift between identities. You may perceive the story from outside your own body. You may speak words you would never speak awake. These shifts show the brain exploring different aspects of the self. Dreams loosen the boundaries of identity, so the mind can examine itself from angles not available in waking consciousness. Narrative is also the bridge between internal states and conscious understanding. A dream may reveal an emotion you have suppressed, a desire you have ignored, a fear you have minimized, a truth you have not confronted. But the dream does not show these directly. It expresses them through story, through metaphor, through events that feel symbolic rather than literal. The dreaming brain uses narrative the way a poet uses imagery, not to describe reality, but to reveal meaning. And in this quiet theater of the night, the brain becomes both author and audience. It generates the story and then experiences it as if it were happening. This dual role is part of what makes dreaming so powerful. The brain is practicing emotional scenarios internally, experiencing their impact, and adjusting its network of meaning accordingly. When you awaken from a dream, you may not remember the story, but that does not mean the narrative had no effect. Most of the emotional work of dreaming happens without conscious recall. The brain feels the dream, integrates its emotional message, and returns you to waking life slightly changed, slightly updated, slightly more balanced. The dream story is a psychological event, whether remembered or not. Every night, when the world grows quiet, the brain returns to its ancient craft. It becomes a storyteller, a creator, a myth maker, a weaver of inner truth. It shapes chaos into meaning, emotion into imagery, memory into metaphor, experience into narrative. The dreaming mind tells stories not because it wants to entertain you, but because it needs to understand you. Fear, desire, and shadow. How dreams reveal hidden emotional layers. Every person carries a shadow, not a darkness to fear, but the unseen portion of the self. The shadow is made of everything you avoid, everything you suppress, everything you fear to express, everything you have not yet understood in yourself. It is the unspoken emotion behind your smile, the unacknowledged longing beneath your strength, the unfinished stories you carry quietly inside. In waking life, these layers of the psyche are easy to hide under routine, distraction, or self-control. But at night, when the logical mind loosens and the emotional brain awakens, these hidden layers move into the dream world. Dreams are the stage on which the shadow speaks. Fear, desire, vulnerability, conflict, shame, longing, anger, hope. These emotional forces are woven into dream imagery in ways that bypass the ego's defenses. Dreams do not ask permission to reveal what you feel. They simply reveal it, not always in literal form, but in symbolic, psychological, emotional expression. This is why dreams can feel startlingly honest, even when their content is surreal. To understand why fear and desire appear so prominently in dreams, we must begin with the emotional architecture of REM sleep. During REM, the amygdala becomes highly active. This is the emotional epicenter of the brain, the region that detects threat, assigns emotional weight, and prepares the body to respond. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational judgment, inhibition, and self-monitoring, becomes less active. This creates a perfect environment for the subconscious to express emotional truths without censorship. The amygdala lights up feelings. The prefrontal cortex goes quiet. Emotion rises. Control falls. The shadow steps forward. Fear appears in dreams because it is one of the most deeply rooted emotional circuits in the human brain. Fear kept early humans alive. It made them cautious, alert, aware of danger. In dreams, fear is not simply replayed, it is rehearsed. Threat simulation theory suggests that nightmares and fear-driven dreams allow the mind to practice danger responses in a safe environment. When you dream of being chased, you are not reliving a trauma. You are rehearsing the instinct to escape, the strategy of survival. But fear in dreams is rarely literal. The dream does not show the real danger. It shows an emotional danger. Being chased may symbolize avoidance in waking life, something you are running from emotionally. Falling may represent fear of loss or instability. Being unprepared may represent anxiety about competence or identity. Being watched may represent vulnerability or self-judgment. The dream exaggerates the emotional truth to make it visible. Fear dreams are the shadow, showing you where your tension lives. Arnold. Yet fear is only one half of the emotional spectrum that emerges in dreams. Desire is the other half. Desire in dreams does not always appear as sexuality, although sexual dreams are common because they express intimacy, longing, connection, vulnerability, or tension. Desire also appears as movement towards something meaningful. A glowing object, a warm light, a person you cannot reach, a place that calls to you, a feeling of searching, yearning, or reaching. Desire in dreams reveals what the waking mind cannot fully articulate. A dream in which you are seeking something, but never finding it, may reflect an unfulfilled longing in waking life. A dream in which you discover something precious may reflect hope, growth, or emerging self-understanding. A dream in which you embrace someone may reflect emotional connection, not necessarily with that person, but with the qualities they symbolize. Desire in dreams is the shadow revealing what you crave. Emotionally, respect, love, safety, adventure, creativity, self-expression. Between fear and desire lies the full spectrum of human emotion, and dreams express all of them. But the most mysterious feature of dreams is how they reveal the shadow self, the part of you that you do not fully see. The shadow is not evil. It is not negative. It is simply the unintegrated portion of the psyche, the feelings you push away, the impulses you doubt, the memories you avoid, the qualities you deny or suppress. The dream brings them into awareness symbolically. For example, a hostile figure may represent anger you hide from others. A neglected child may represent vulnerability you ignore. A powerful character may represent strength you do not claim. A dark room may represent a part of yourself you have not explored. A distorted mirror may represent confusion about identity or self-worth. A locked door may represent an emotional block. A rising tide may represent overwhelming emotion. A shadowy creature may represent repressed instinct or fear. These figures are not separate from you. They are you refracted through symbolism. The shadow also appears in dreams through transformation. A friend becomes a stranger. A house becomes a cave. A familiar place becomes unfamiliar. This shifting identity reflects the brain exploring different aspects of the self. When the ego is quiet, the subconscious can show you parts of yourself that are incompatible with the image you maintain while awake. Dreams allow you to feel things you cannot say, to see things you cannot admit, to experience things you cannot allow yourself to acknowledge. Dreams are honest in a way waking life rarely is. The shadow does not emerge to frighten you. It emerges to integrate you. Dreams are an emotional ecosystem. Fear alerts you to what you must confront. Desire reveals what you must pursue. The shadow shows who you must become more completely. Together, these forces form a map of psychological growth. The brain uses dreams to regulate emotion, but more profoundly, it uses dreams to reveal truths that consciousness obscures. What you fear and what you desire are two sides of the same emotional truth. Fear shows what threatens your emotional world. Desire shows what nourishes it. The shadow shows what is missing between the two. Dreams are not meant to be taken literally. They are meant to be felt. When fear appears, it is the mind asking you to acknowledge something unresolved. When desire appears, it is the mind asking you to move toward authenticity. When the shadow appears, it is the mind asking you to integrate what you have ignored. Fear, desire, and shadow are not disruptions of the dream. They are the purpose of the dream. They reveal the emotional layers beneath your daily life, the layers that shape your choices, influence your relationships, drive your behavior, and form the deepest parts of who you are. Dreams show you not the life you are living, but the inner life you are carrying. Lucid dreaming, awareness inside dreams and the neuroscience behind it. There is a moment in certain dreams when something impossible happens. A contradiction, a strange shift, a sudden realization that the world around you is not the physical world. A quiet recognition that you are dreaming. This moment when awareness emerges inside the dream is one of the most astonishing phenomena in human consciousness. It is called lucid dreaming, and it sits at the boundary between waking and sleeping, between deliberate control and spontaneous imagination, between the conscious mind and the subconscious world. Lucid dreaming is not rare, but it is not common either. Many people experience it a few times in life without understanding why it happens. Yet when it unfolds, it feels unmistakable. There is clarity inside the dream, a sense of agency, a feeling of being awake in a world created by your own mind. The environment is still dreamlike fluid, symbolic, emotional, but your awareness changes everything. To understand lucid dreaming, you must understand the balance of brain activity during REM sleep. In normal dreaming, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for logic, decision-making, and self-awareness, is largely inactive. That is why dreams are non-linear, strange, metaphorical, and unconstrained by reality. But during a lucid dream, something unusual occurs. The prefrontal cortex switches on just enough to create awareness, but not enough to fully wake you. Lucid dreaming is a hybrid state, a merging of REM sleep and conscious awareness. Half dream, half mind. Scientists call this a dissociated state of consciousness. The systems responsible for imagery, emotion, and vivid sensory simulation remain fully active. But the systems responsible for introspection blink awake. This reactivation gives you the ability to reflect on the dream as it unfolds. The moment lucidity begins, something profound occurs. You realize that nothing in the dream can harm you, and yet everything in the dream can teach you. This shift from unconscious immersion to conscious exploration reveals how extraordinary the human mind truly is. While awake, you experience the world through your senses. In dreams, you experience the world through imagination. In lucid dreams, you experience the world through imagination with awareness. The neuroscience behind this is elegant. During lucidity, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex lights up. This region is associated with working memory, reflection, and self-monitoring. At the same time, the parietal lobes enhance sensory integration, and the connection between the frontal and temporal regions strengthens. This neural coordination creates a remarkable state. You become both the creator and the observer of the dream. The environment flows from your subconscious, yet your conscious mind can influence it. You can change a scene. You can shift the dream's direction. You can explore symbolic elements deliberately. You can interact with dream figures knowingly. You can ask questions, seek clarity, face fears, unlock memories. This is why lucid dreaming has been used in psychological practices for decades. It provides a gateway into the emotional landscape with awareness intact. Fear changes when you face it willingly. Desire becomes clearer when approached consciously. The shadow becomes less threatening when seen directly. Lucid dreaming can transform nightmares. Someone being chased can turn around and face the pursuer. Often the pursuer dissolves, transforms, or speaks. This is because nightmares contain emotional energy that the dreamer has not yet integrated. Lucid awareness gives the mind the power to confront, not flee. But lucidity is not only about overcoming fear. It is also about exploration. Inside a lucid dream, you can fly, walk through walls, breathe underwater, or travel to places that exist only in imagination. These experiences feel profoundly real because the sensory cortex is fully active. The brain uses the same neural pathways it uses when perceiving the physical world. The difference is that the source of the experience comes from within. This reveals something extraordinary. The brain does not differentiate between real and imagined sensory input. processes both as lived experience. This is why lucid dreams can be emotionally transformative or creatively illuminating. Artists throughout history have found inspiration through lucid dreams. The surrealists embraced them. Inventors described insights arising from them. Musicians heard melodies in them. Writers found narratives emerging through them. The dream state is a boundless creative well. Lucidity allows conscious access to that well. But why does it happen at all? What triggers awareness inside a dream? There are several possibilities. 1. A cognitive contradiction. When something breaks the laws of waking reality, like reading text that shifts, lights that won't turn on, or gravity behaving strangely, the mind suddenly recognizes the impossibility. 2. Increased prefrontal activation. Sometimes awareness rises spontaneously due to random neural fluctuations. 3. Emotional intensity. A very frightening or very meaningful dream can trigger reflection and awareness. 4. Dream memory. Occasionally, you remember falling asleep and awareness flows through the transition. 5. A stable self-image. Some people have stronger metacognitive networks and are naturally more likely to become lucid. Each of these paths leads to the same threshold, the moment the dreamer recognizes that the world around them is not waking reality. But what makes lucid dreaming so meaningful is not the extraordinary experiences it allows. It is the psychological insight it provides. The dream becomes a mirror, not only of subconscious emotion, but of conscious identity interacting with that emotion. The dreamer becomes both student and explorer. In lucid dreams, you can ask questions. Who are you? What do you represent? Why are you here? What do I need to understand? Dream figures often respond, not because they are independent beings, but because they are personified fragments of the self. The dream speaks through them. Emotion speaks through them. Memory speaks through them. Lucid dreaming opens a dialogue between the conscious and subconscious mind. Yet it is important to remember that lucidity does not erase the symbolic nature of dreams. Even with awareness, the dream remains metaphorical, non-linear, emotionally driven. The subconscious continues to create the environment. The conscious mind simply brings clarity into the space. This is why lucid dreaming feels profound. It reveals the architecture of the self in real time. It shows the dreamer that consciousness is not a single state, but a spectrum. It shows that awareness can exist even inside imagination. It shows that the mind can create worlds and walk through them knowingly. In the space where waking and dreaming meet, the boundaries of identity blur. The dreamer meets the dream. The conscious meets the unconscious. And the mind recognizes itself as both observer and creator. Lucid dreaming is not an escape. It is an encounter with the mind, with the self, with the symbolic world beneath the surface of awareness. Cross-cultural dream meaning. Ancient traditions, myths, and collective symbolism. Long before neuroscience measured REM cycles, before psychology explored the unconscious, before memory and emotion were mapped onto brain circuits, human beings looked to dreams for meaning. Dreams were the first form of inner mythology messages from the unseen world, hints about destiny, warnings from the spirit realm, reflections of moral life, or glimpses of truths too large for daylight. Across cultures and across thousands of years, dreams have carried extraordinary significance. What is remarkable is not the diversity of interpretations, but the consistency of the themes. Long before cultures had contact with one another, humans in distant places reported similar dream motifs, similar symbols, similar emotional patterns. This tells us something profound. Dreaming arises from universal human structures, universal fears, universal desires, universal questions. Dreams do not belong to any one culture. They belong to human nature. To understand cross-cultural dream meaning, we must travel through time. In ancient Egypt, dreams were considered divine messages. Egyptians believed that dreams came from the gods, especially from spirits that guided or protected individuals. They slept in temples dedicated to dream incubation, sacred spaces where dreamers sought healing, prophecy, or guidance. Priests interpreted dream images not symbolically, but cosmologically. A dream of water was a message from the Nile. A dream of light was a message from Ra. A dream of animals was a message from protective spirits. These interpretations shaped decisions of rulers, healers, and priests. Egyptians kept some of the earliest dream journals. In them, dreams were seen as reflections of fate, morality, and spiritual favor. What stands out is that emotional tone mattered. A bright dream was good fortune. A dark dream was a warning. Even then, people understood that emotional resonance carried meaning. In ancient Greece, dreams blended psychology and mythology. Greek culture produced the earliest theories that dreams arose from within the dreamer, not from the gods alone. Philosophers like Aristotle believed dreams were expressions of the inner life, shaped by emotion and bodily states. Yet Greek temples also held dream sanctuaries, where the sick slept for healing. It was believed that Asclepius, the god of healing, visited dreamers in the night and guided them through symbolic visions. The Greeks developed two parallel dream traditions, one scientific, one spiritual, a duality that still exists today. In ancient China, dreams were seen as a journey of the soul. During sleep, the spirit was believed to wander through parallel realms, meeting ancestors, exploring landscapes of meaning, and receiving guidance. Chinese medicine interpreted dreams according to the internal organs. Fear dreams tied to the kidneys, anger dreams to the liver, grief dreams to the lungs. The emotional-body connection was central. Dreams reflected physical imbalance, emotional tension, and spiritual disharmony. Chinese tradition also recognized lucid dreaming long before modern science did. Taoist practitioners used dreams as training ground spaces to cultivate awareness, strength, discipline, and inner stillness. The idea that one could awaken inside a dream was not mystical to them. It was practice. In indigenous cultures around the world, dreams are woven deeply into identity. Many Native American nations view dreams as sacred communication. Some tribes believe dreams come from the Great Spirit. Others believe dreams are messages from ancestors or reflections of the dreamer's purpose. For many indigenous peoples, dreams guide life choices, social roles, and spiritual responsibilities. The Ojibwe tradition of the dream catcher arose from the belief that dream spirits travel through the night air. Good dreams pass through the web and descend gently to the sleeper. Harmful dreams are caught and dissolved by the morning light. This is not superstition. It is a symbolic representation of emotional filtering, a cultural metaphor for how the mind must sort harmful emotion from necessary insight. In the Amazon, certain tribes drink plant medicines to enter dreamlike states intentionally. Dreams are considered alternative realities, equally valid and equally meaningful as waking life. For them, dreams are not illusions, but different layers of existence. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, dreams are layers of consciousness. Hindu philosophy categorizes experience into waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and pure awareness, each one a different expression of consciousness. Dreams are reflections of karma, impressions left on the mind, unresolved desires, and spiritual lessons. The Upanishads describe dreams not as random events, but as windows into the subtle body, the part of the self that carries emotional and spiritual memory across lifetimes. Buddhism teaches dream yoga, a practice of cultivating awareness in dreams to achieve insight, compassion, and liberation from illusion. The purpose is to see the dream as dream, to experience its fluidity without attachment, and to understand the mind as the creator of experience. This parallels modern scientific understanding, though discovered centuries earlier. Dreams reveal the constructed nature of consciousness. In Islamic traditions, dreams are divided into three types: dreams of truth, meaningful, symbolic, guiding; dreams of the self-reflections of thoughts or anxieties; dreams of disruption, emotional turbulence, or spiritual confusion. Prophetic dreams were historically taken seriously, recorded and interpreted with care. Symbolism played a major role, but interpretation emphasized humility. The dreamer was encouraged to seek wisdom rather than certainty. This again aligns with psychological understanding. Dreams are invitations to reflect, not rigid messages. In medieval Europe, dreams were moral landscapes. They were interpreted through Christianity as tests, warnings, temptations, or revelations. Nightmares were often described as spiritual battle. Pleasant dreams were divine reassurance. Though the interpretations were religious, the emotional themes were the same as today: fear, desire, guilt, hope, longing. Across all cultures, certain dream motifs appear again and again: falling, being chased, teeth breaking, losing something precious; flying, being unable to move; being late, returning to childhood places; encountering the dead; wandering through unfamiliar rooms; searching for someone; standing on the edge of a vast landscape. These motifs are not cultural artifacts, they are human artifacts. They arise from universal emotions: vulnerability, pressure, fear of failure, desire for freedom, grief, longing, transformation. The images differ, but the emotional truth is the same everywhere. What is fascinating is that many cultures recognized something modern science reaffirmed. Dreams reveal the emotional state of the dreamer. A peaceful dream reflects inner harmony. A chaotic dream reflects inner conflict. A symbolic dream reflects psychological transformation. A repeating dream reflects unresolved issues. A lucid dream reflects emerging self-awareness. Dreams have always been mirrors. The only thing that changes across cultures is the language used to describe the reflection. Modern neuroscience shows that emotion drives dream imagery. Ancient cultures believed the soul traveled during sleep, that spirits communicated through visions. The dreams held prophecy, guidance, or sacred insight. What they were describing through metaphor and spirituality was the undeniable emotional and psychological significance of dreams. They saw dreams not as noise but as meaning, not as illusion but as revelation, not as random firing but as wisdom. And on a deeper level, they were right. Every culture recognized that dreams speak in symbols, not sentences. That dreams express emotion, not fact. The dreams reveal what the waking mind hides. The dreams connect the individual to something larger, whether that larger was described as ancestors, gods, nature, the soul, or the unconscious. Cross-cultural studies show an astonishing truth. Humans everywhere dream in the same emotional colors. Our images differ, our myths differ, but our inner lives do not. Dreams reveal a shared human interior, a universal landscape shaped by emotion, memory, fear, desire, identity, loss, hope, and transformation. Dreams are where the human story becomes one story. Nightmare and trauma, how the mind attempts to process pain. Nightmares are often misunderstood. People imagine them as disturbances, interruptions, moments when sleep goes wrong. But in truth, nightmares are not malfunctions. They are messages. They are emotional alarms. They are the mind attempting to process something overwhelming, unresolved, or deeply painful. They arise not to torment the dreamer, but to help them confront what waking consciousness avoids. To understand nightmares, you must understand how emotion behaves during REM sleep. In waking life, emotion is regulated by the prefrontal cortex, the logical, reasoning center. It helps modulate fear, soften intense feelings, and apply context. But during REM, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. Emotion, especially fear, sorrow, anger, guilt, and grief, flows freely. The amygdala becomes highly active, amplifying emotional memory. And because the rational mind is quiet, the dream cannot filter or dilute these feelings. The dream expresses them directly, intensely, symbolically. Nightmares arise when emotional material becomes too charged to integrate gently. They are the mind's attempt to bring unresolved emotion into awareness, not to punish, but to heal. There are three main kinds of nightmares: spontaneous nightmares, rehearsal nightmares, trauma nightmares. Each has a different psychological purpose. Spontaneous nightmares come from accumulated stress or emotional overload. They often appear when the mind is processing hidden anxiety, conflict, or fear. They may have symbolic content: a collapsing building, a rising tide, losing someone, being trapped. These images represent emotional pressure, not literal danger. The dream is signaling that something in the emotional system needs attention. Rehearsal nightmares come from the mind practicing threat scenarios. This is part of the threat simulation theory, an evolutionary perspective suggesting that fear dreams helped early humans rehearse responses to danger. Being chased, falling, being hunted, losing control. These nightmares allow the brain to strengthen neural pathways associated with survival. Even today, they appear during times of stress or uncertainty. The dream is preparing you for emotional or psychological threats, not physical ones. Trauma nightmares are different. These arise when the mind is trying to process overwhelming experiences: grief, violence, loss, betrayal, abuse, or situations that exceed the emotional capacity to cope. The brain attempts to integrate the trauma, but the emotional charge is so high, the memory so vivid, that the dream becomes invasive and destabilizing. Trauma nightmares often repeat. This is not random. The repetition is an attempt at mastery. The mind keeps returning to the painful memory because it cannot yet integrate it. It approaches the trauma again and again, trying to reduce the emotional intensity, trying to make sense of it, trying to connect it to the larger story of your life. But trauma overwhelms the emotional brain. It hijacks the amygdala. It blunts the prefrontal cortex. It disrupts memory consolidation. This is why traumatic dreams often replay events literally, not symbolically. Before the brain can transform trauma into narrative, it must first survive the emotional storm. Trauma dreams can feel unbearable because you relive sensations: fear, helplessness, panic, shame without waking world context. The dream becomes a space where the emotional memory remains alive. Yet even in this terrifying space, the dream is trying to do something important. It is attempting to integrate what the conscious mind has not yet healed. A trauma dream is not a replay. It is an effort. But the mind can only do so much unaided. This is why trauma nightmares are persistent. This is why they resist resolution. This is why therapeutic support can be essential. Nightmares are the emotional brain asking for help. But even outside of trauma, nightmares serve a role. They reveal emotional truths you may not recognize consciously. Many dreams that feel frightening are not about danger at all. They are about vulnerability, loss of control, uncertainty, or emotional pressure. For example, a dream of drowning may reflect emotional overwhelm. A dream of being chased may reflect avoidance of a difficult truth. A dream of losing your voice may reflect suppressed expression. A dream of falling may reflect fear of failure or instability. A dream of being alone may reflect hidden loneliness or abandonment fears. The content seems terrifying, but the meaning is emotional. The nightmare is the brain expressing what the conscious mind suppresses. The symbolic nature of nightmares reveals the architecture of inner turmoil. They show you where you feel unsafe internally. They show you where you feel unprepared. They show you where you feel threatened emotionally. They show you where you feel ungrounded. But nightmares are also creative. They amplify, exaggerate, distort, not to deceive you, but to make the emotional truth unmistakable. The dream uses metaphor the way a poet uses imagery. It reveals what cannot be spoken plainly. Why then does the mind terrify itself? Why does it conjure horror? Because emotional avoidance keeps the psyche fragmented. The nightmare forces you to confront what you would rather ignore. But dreams do not simply confront. They transform. In repeated nightmares, especially trauma-related ones, something subtle begins to happen. The dream shifts slightly. The environment changes. The distance increases. Your role alters. The emotional intensity decreases just a little. This tiny shift is the beginning of emotional reframing. The brain is trying to rewrite the trauma memory, trying to soften it, trying to restore it differently, trying to integrate it into the larger narrative of your life. This is why working with dreams in therapy can be powerful. When trauma is processed consciously, the dreams change. When the emotional system stabilizes, the nightmares decrease. When the mind integrates the memory, the repetition stops. In this way, nightmares are not a sign of emotional failure. They are a sign of emotional effort. The psyche is trying to heal. Even outside of trauma, the nightmare is part of emotional growth. It is a signal, a message, a communication from the deepest part of the mind saying, something in you needs attention, something needs to be felt, something needs to be faced, something needs to be released. Nightmares are intense because emotional truth is intense. But they are meaningful because emotional truth matters. The dream does not hurt you. It shows you where you are hurting. The dream does not break you. It reveals where you need strengthening. The dream does not punish you. It illuminates the path toward healing. A nightmare is the mind holding a light in the darkest place and asking you to look. Creativity in sleep. How dreams spark insight and problem solving. Dreams are often described as strange, chaotic, or illogical. Yet beneath their surreal surface, they contain one of the mind's most profound abilities, the capacity to generate insight. Dreams rearrange ideas, recombine memories, discover unexpected connections, and reveal solutions that waking consciousness struggles to find. If waking thought is linear, dreaming thought is expansive. If waking thought follows rules, dreaming thought dissolves them. And in this loosened, fluid state, creativity thrives. To understand why, we must first explore what creativity actually is. Creativity is not the ability to produce art or music or stories. It is the capacity to combine existing ideas in new ways. It is pattern making. It is flexibility. It is the brain stepping outside its habitual pathways and discovering something surprising, meaningful, or illuminating. And this is exactly what the dreaming mind excels at. During REM sleep, the brain enters a state unlike anything in waking life. The prefrontal cortex, which imposes structure, logic, and self-monitoring, quiets. The default mode network, responsible for introspection, memory, and imagination, becomes highly active. The emotional brain lights up, adding depth and resonance to whatever arises. And sensory regions create vivid simulations, grounding ideas in imagery and experience. This neurological configuration is the perfect environment for creative thinking. Without the internal critic active, the mind becomes free to explore unusual associations. Without logical constraints, unexpected connections emerge. Without the narrative demands of waking life, the brain can wander into new territories of thought. Dreams become laboratories where the mind experiments with possibility. Throughout history, creative breakthroughs have emerged from dreams. Mary Shelley conceived Frankenstein after a vivid nightmare. The structure of the benzene molecule was discovered in a dream of a serpent biting its tail. Paul McCartney heard the melody of Yesterday in a dream before ever writing it down. Dmitri Mendeleev, creator of the periodic table, claimed that in a dream he saw the elements fall into place. Einstein explored thought experiments in dreamlike states long before they became equations. These are not coincidences. They reveal how dreams reorganize the mind. But what exactly happens in the dreaming brain that allows creativity to flourish? First, memories become unbound. During waking life, memory is organized according to logic, chronology, and context. In dreams, these boundaries dissolve. Events from childhood may combine with recent stressors. Faces from different times merge into a single figure. Places that never existed feel familiar. This recombination is not random. It is associative. The brain pairs memories with emotional resonance, similarity, contrast, or symbolic relevance. When you dream of walking through your old school with your current co-workers, the mind is not confused. It is comparing emotional themes, evaluation, pressure, identity, growth. That comparison might lead to insights about your current life, insights that the waking mind had not yet articulated. Second, emotion becomes a guiding force. Dreams are emotionally amplified. This amplification pushes the mind to examine feelings or conflicts that need attention. When creativity arises from emotion, it is more authentic and more powerful. But this is why problem-solving dreams often feel emotionally satisfying. The solution feels right even before it is understood logically. Third, the mind uses metaphor. Dreams think in imagery, not in language. Symbols allow the brain to express complex ideas in simple forms. A dream of crossing a bridge may symbolize overcoming a barrier. A dream of a locked box may symbolize hidden potential. A dream of a storm clearing may symbolize emotional release. These metaphors help the mind process experiences that are too complex to articulate consciously. The symbolic nature of dreams is not a barrier to understanding. It is an advanced form of understanding. Fourth, dreams remove the ego. The ego is the rational, controlling, self-conscious part of the mind. It is essential in waking life. It helps navigate social interactions, responsibilities, and daily structure. But the ego often limits creativity. It censors ideas. It avoids emotional discomfort. It seeks safety and predictability. In dreams, the ego steps aside. The subconscious speaks freely. Ideas emerge without judgment or inhibition. This is why dreams often reveal solutions that the waking mind overlooks. The dream does not doubt itself. Fifth, dreams simulate outcomes. The brain rehearses scenarios, confronting a problem, navigating uncertainty, facing a fear, exploring an opportunity, imagining new perspectives. By simulating these possibilities, the dream allows the mind to test ideas safely. This simulation process strengthens neural pathways that support insight. Sixth, the brain reorganizes knowledge. During REM, the hippocampus and cortex exchange information. New memories are integrated with old ones. This integration produces new meaning. The brain sees patterns that were invisible before. Creative insight is often the realization of a hidden pattern. Dreams reveal these patterns. For example, if you carry tension about a particular relationship, but the waking mind denies or ignores it, the dream may exaggerate the emotional dynamic and place it into a symbolic scene. The dream might use different characters, different settings, different imagery, but the emotional truth becomes clearer. When you wake, you might not remember the details, but you may feel suddenly aware of what is wrong, or what you need, or what you want to express. Insight often arrives as a feeling, not a thought. Dreams cultivate that feeling. They prepare the emotional groundwork for understanding. Seventh, dreams encourage divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is the ability to generate multiple solutions, multiple perspectives, multiple possibilities. It is the opposite of rigid, linear problem-solving. Dreams excel at divergence. They leap from one idea to another. They merge unrelated concepts. They bend rules. They imagine impossible scenarios. This divergence is what makes dreams so creatively potent. And when the waking mind later engages with a task, it benefits from the expanded associative network created during sleep. Creativity is not only artistic or intellectual. It is emotional creativity, relational creativity, self-understanding creativity. Dreams can reveal a new direction in life, a new understanding of a relationship, a new way of handling conflict, a new perspective on the self, a new frame for an old memory, a new possibility that had been invisible. The dreaming mind is not chaotic. It is creative. It explores. It experiments. It reveals. It connects. Dreams are the subconscious generating insight. They allow the mind to grow in directions the waking self cannot yet imagine. And when you wake from a dream with a sudden sense of clarity, even if you cannot explain why it is, because the dreaming mind has done work that your conscious mind is only just beginning to understand. The philosophy of dreaming. What dreams teach us about consciousness? There is a question that has lived in human thought for as long as humans have been able to think. What is consciousness? Is it the brain's electrical activity? Is it the experience of being aware? Is it the inner witness observing thought, emotion, and sensation? Is it a story we tell ourselves? A biological illusion? A spiritual essence? A process that emerges from complexity? Dreaming places us directly at the center of this mystery. It is one of the few experiences where consciousness reveals its own flexibility, its ability to reshape itself, dissolve its boundaries, and rebuild reality from within. When you dream, you are conscious without environment. You feel things without stimuli. You move without a body. You perceive without senses. You exist without the physical world. Dreaming is consciousness turned inward. Dreaming is perception without external reality. Dreaming is the self encountering its own architecture. If waking consciousness is defined by the world outside, then dreaming consciousness is defined by the world inside. The first great philosophical insight from dreams is this: the mind does not need the world to create experience. The brain constructs reality every night from memory, imagination, and emotion. This means perception is not passive, it is active. We do not experience the world as it is. We experience interpretations the mind constructs. Dreaming reveals that your mind is always creating something, even when you believe you are merely perceiving. The second insight is that the self is not fixed. In dreams, your identity shifts. You may inhabit your own body or someone else's. You may drift between first-person and third-person awareness. You may watch yourself from outside or experience someone else's perspective. This fluidity suggests that the sense of I is flexible and narrative, not a permanent structure. If the self can shift so radically during sleep, what is the true nature of identity? Dreams show that the self is a process, not an object. A flowing, changing collection of memories, emotions, beliefs, and perceptions. The dream self is a version of you, but not bound by the rules that waking life demands. This leads to the third insight. Reality is partly constructed by expectation. In waking life, we believe the world is stable. Objects stay in place. Physical laws remain constant. Time moves forward. But in dreams, expectations shape reality. If you expect a door to appear, it appears. If you expect something to chase you, it does. If you expect to fall, you fall. If you expect to fly, you rise effortlessly. This reveals a deeper truth about consciousness. Expectation is a fundamental component of experience. Even in waking life, your brain constantly predicts and constructs perception based on expectation, a truth increasingly supported by predictive processing theory. Dreams simply remove the external world, making the predictive nature of consciousness visible. The fourth insight is that consciousness has layers: waking, thinking, daydreaming, sleeping, dreaming, lucidity, deep sleep without dreams. These states differ not only in content, but in structure. Each represents a different relationship between awareness, emotion, memory, and sensation. Deep sleep has no imagery, no narrative, no self, yet the mind persists. Dream sleep has imagery and narrative, but a weakened sense of self. Lucid sleep has imagery and narrative with a strengthened sense of self. Waking life has stable sensory input, linear time, and social context. These layers show that consciousness is not binary, not on or off. It is a spectrum of states unified by the fact that each state is still you. The fifth insight from dreams is the relationship between emotion and meaning. Dreams often feel meaningful even when they are bizarre. This feeling arises not from logic, but from emotional truth. Dreams show that meaning is not something we think, it is something we feel. Philosophically, this suggests that human meaning-making arises from emotion more than intellect. The dream, then, becomes a window into the emotional roots of consciousness where meaning is born. The sixth insight concerns time. Dreams stretch, compress, or abandon time entirely. Minutes feel like hours. Hours pass in seconds. Entire lifetimes unfold in a single night. This reveals that the brain constructs time the same way it constructs space. Time is not experienced passively. It is created internally. If time can be manipulated so radically in dreams, then our waking experience of time may also be a construct shaped by attention, emotion, and expectation. Dreams show that psychological time and physical time are not the same. The mind remembers time differently than the world measures it. The seventh philosophical insight concerns free will. In dreams, you often feel like a participant in events you do not choose. Scenes unfold without your control. Characters behave unpredictably. Emotions arise spontaneously. This mirrors certain aspects of waking life, how thoughts and feelings often arise without intention, how the mind generates ideas before you consciously choose them. Dreaming reveals that much of consciousness is automatic, driven by processes beneath awareness. This challenges the idea of a completely free, consciously controlled self. But lucid dreams complicate the question. In a lucid dream, you can choose. You can act deliberately. You can redirect the narrative. You can explore. This suggests that free will exists, but only within specific layers of awareness, a blend of conscious choice and underlying unconscious mechanics. The eighth insight is perhaps the most mysterious. Dreams blur the line between perception and imagination. If you can taste food, feel texture, experience emotion, and perceive light entirely from imagination, what does that imply about the nature of waking perception? It implies that perception is controlled hallucination, the brain's best model of external reality, shaped by memory, prediction, and sensation. Dreams are hallucinations without external constraints. Waking life is hallucination constrained by sensory input. This idea does not diminish reality, it deepens it. It shows that consciousness is an artist, always painting the world. The ninth insight concerns the boundary between mind and world. What dreams demonstrate is that the mind is capable of generating complete worlds internally. This leads to one of the oldest philosophical questions. If reality feels real because the brain constructs experience, how do we know waking reality is fundamentally different from dreaming reality? Most philosophers, from Plato to Descartes to contemporary thinkers, grappled with this question. Dreams intensify the mystery. In waking life, we test reality through consistency, shared experience, physical laws. In dreams, we rely on internal coherence alone. The difference feels absolute, yet the mechanics of perception overlap. Dreams ask us to examine what consciousness truly is. Is consciousness the ability to perceive, the ability to create, the ability to reflect, the ability to imagine, the ability to experience meaning? Dreams contain all of these. They show that consciousness is flexible, that the self is fluid, that meaning is emotional, that time is subjective, that perception is constructed, that identity is layered, that belief shapes experience, that the mind is capable of worlds. The 10th insight, perhaps the deepest, is this. Dreams reveal that consciousness is a relationship, not a thing. A relationship between awareness and memory, between emotion and image, between experience and interpretation, between self and shadow, between waking and sleeping, between the inner world and the outer world. Dreams are where these relationships become visible. They show the mind interacting with itself. They reveal the architecture beneath the surface of awareness. They expose the roots of thought, feeling, memory, identity, and imagination. Dreams do not answer the question of consciousness. They widen it, they deepen it, they complicate it, and they make it beautiful. To dream is to witness consciousness exploring itself freely, creatively, vulnerably, without the constraints of waking life. Dreams do not simply reflect consciousness. They reveal its nature, the future of the dream science, technology, decoding, and the emerging frontier. For thousands of years, dreams belonged entirely to the private world. Invisible, untouchable, mysterious. A realm that could be felt but not measured, remembered but not captured, described but never truly shared. For most of human history, dreams were known only through memory fading at dawn, reshaped by emotion, transformed by storytelling. They were ephemeral shadows on the inner walls of the mind. But today, for the first time, science is beginning to illuminate this hidden territory. What was once mythic and unknowable is slowly becoming measurable, mappable, and decodable. The future of dream science is not about destroying mystery. It is about understanding the hidden architecture with clarity, compassion, and humility. And what is emerging now is nothing less than extraordinary. To understand where dream research is heading, we must explore four major frontiers: dream decoding, dream intervention, lucid dreaming technology, dream-based therapeutic innovation. Each frontier brings us closer to the inner world, not to invade it, but to understand how the brain constructs experience, meaning, emotion, and identity in sleep. Dream decoding reading dreams. From the brain, in laboratories across the world in Japan, the United States, Europe, and South Korea, researchers have taken the first steps toward decoding dreams directly from neural activity. Using advanced fMRI and machine learning, scientists can now map the visual content of dreams with surprising accuracy. Here is how it works. During wakefulness, participants view thousands of images while their brain activity is recorded. A machine learning model learns the patterns associated with specific categories: faces, landscapes, text, motion, animals, objects. Later, when the participant falls asleep in the scanner, the same neural signatures appear spontaneously during REM dreams. The algorithm matches these signatures to categories it learned earlier. The results are astonishing. A participant dreams of a face. The model detects face-related neural patterns. A participant dreams of walking through a city. The model identifies shapes and structures. A participant dreams of water. The model detects fluid motion signatures. No details, no story, no full images, not yet. But categories, concepts, patterns of thought. Scientists have created rough visual reconstructions, blurry, shifting, impressionistic but recognizable echoes of the dreamer's internal visions. This is not mind reading, it is pattern reading, yet the implications are profound. Dream decoding opens the door to understanding how the brain stores and retrieves imagery, how symbolic content emerges, how memory fragments combine, how the emotional brain shapes perception, how the subconscious expresses itself. We are only at the beginning. As AI models improve, as imaging becomes more precise, as neural networks are mapped more deeply, dream decoding will become clearer. But this raises ethical questions, the deepest in the world of neuroscience. Should dreams be decoded without consent? Should therapy use dream recordings? Should law enforcement ever access dream data? Should we treat dreams as private mental property? The future of dream science will require not only technological progress, but moral wisdom. 2. Dream intervention changing dreams in real time. Another frontier is dream intervention, the ability to influence dreams while they happen. This is already possible in several ways. The first method is targeted memory reactivation. During sleep, subtle sounds or scents linked to prior learning can influence dream content. If a person practices piano with a specific sound cue, and that cue is played during REM sleep, the dream often incorporates music and improves procedural memory. If a scent associated with fear exposure therapy is presented during sleep, emotional healing accelerates. Dream intervention can also help with nightmares. A specific sound can be associated with safety while awake, then introduced during REM sleep to soften nightmare intensity. Early studies show that with repeated pairing, nightmares shift, becoming less violent, less overwhelming, less emotionally disruptive. The second method is direct neural stimulation. Low-intensity electrical stimulation over the frontal cortex can increase the likelihood of lucid dreaming by boosting gamma wave activity associated with metacognitive awareness. This does not create a lucid dream, but it increases the probability that awareness emerges spontaneously. The third method is sensory cueing. Wearable devices detect REM sleep through eye movement and gently introduce cues, soft lights, vibrations, tones meant to signal the dreamer, "You are dreaming." If the cue is incorporated into the dream narrative, lucidity may spark. We are entering an age where dreams can be nudged, guided, influenced, not controlled, not manipulated, but gently shaped. This opens new therapeutic possibilities. Nightmares may be softened. Trauma memories may be integrated more safely. Emotions may be processed with greater support. But it also raises questions. How much influence is appropriate? Where is the boundary between healing and intrusion? These questions will define the ethics of future dream technology. 3. Lucid dreaming technology. Tools for awareness. Lucid dreaming, once considered rare and mystical, is becoming accessible through technology. Researchers and engineers are creating tools designed to increase lucidity by aligning cues, brain patterns, and self-awareness. Consider the latest innovations. Headbands that detect REM sleep with EEG sensors and deliver gentle signals to prompt lucidity. Eye-tracking sleep masks that flash subtle light patterns recognized by the sleeping brain. VR programs that train metacognitive skills, increasing the likelihood of lucidity. Biofeedback apps that help dreamers maintain awareness during hypnagogia. Brain-computer interface prototypes that detect dream state intention patterns. The merging of neuroscience and technology may soon allow dreamers to explore dream worlds with heightened clarity. Practice emotional resilience inside symbolic narratives. Engage with subconscious material more consciously. Overcome recurring nightmares through direct confrontation. Enhance creativity and problem-solving by intentionally incubating dream themes. For thousands of years, spiritual traditions have used dreams for insight, meditation, and self-awareness. Now science is creating tools that parallel ancient methods with precision and repeatability. Lucidity reveals the architecture of the self. Technology will make that insight more accessible. IV, dream-based therapeutic innovation, emotional healing through sleep. Perhaps the most promising frontier of dream science lies in mental health. Nightmares associated with trauma, anxiety, and grief have long been seen as symptoms. Now we understand they are processes, attempts at healing. And with scientific support, this healing can be enhanced. Here are emerging therapeutic directions. Dream rescripting, where the patient imagines alternative outcomes for a recurring nightmare, which the brain later incorporates spontaneously. Sleep-based exposure therapy, where emotional triggers are reintroduced during sleep to reduce intensity. Dream rehearsal, practicing new emotional responses to symbolic situations. Lucid nightmare therapy, where awareness inside the dream allows confrontation and transformation. Sleep-integrated grief therapy, where dream contact with lost loved ones provides emotional closure. Memory reconsolidation research using dream moments to restructure traumatic emotional memories. Dreams are no longer treated as random. They are recognized as active emotional processing systems. Future mental health treatments may incorporate dream work as a core principle, not a peripheral one. Imagine therapy that happens not only in the office, but during the night. Imagine emotional integration supported by both waking and dreaming. Imagine trauma healing, enhanced by the brain's natural nocturnal architecture. This is not distant. It is already beginning. The mystery that remains. For all the advances in dream science, one truth remains unchanged. Dreams still hold mystery. Dreams still carry meaning beyond measurement. Dreams still reveal our inner landscape in ways no technology can fully capture. Even if we could decode every image, map every neural pattern, and influence every REM cycle, the emotional, symbolic, and philosophical depth of the dreams would remain something only the dreamer can truly experience. Science may one day reconstruct dream images, but it cannot feel them for you. It cannot interpret their personal meaning. It cannot replace the emotional intuition that dreams awaken. The future of dream science is bright, expansive, and revolutionary, but it does not diminish the ancient truth. Dreams are a conversation between you and the deepest part of your mind. Technology can listen to the conversation, but only you can understand it. Conclusion. Night falls, and the world outside goes quiet, but the world within does not. Dreams continue the ancient work of the mind, weaving together memory, emotion, symbolism, fear, desire, creativity, and meaning in ways no waking experience ever could. Through the rhythms of REM and non-REM, through the fluid imagery of the subconscious, through the emotional honesty of the shadow, through the brilliance of nighttime creativity, and through the philosophical mystery of consciousness in itself, dreaming reveals what it means to be human. When you sleep, your brain becomes many things. It becomes a healer, soothing emotional wounds that waking life does not give you space to feel. It becomes a storyteller, shaping your inner world into scenes and narratives that reflect your deepest truths. It becomes an archivist, organizing memories and strengthening the foundation of your identity. It becomes an artist, blending symbols, sensations, and metaphors to express what words cannot. It becomes an explorer, traveling through emotional landscapes in search of clarity and balance. It becomes a philosopher, dissolving and rebuilding the self in a fluid state of consciousness. It becomes a scientist, running simulations and rehearsing possibilities for the challenges ahead. It becomes a mirror, reflecting the unspoken, the unresolved, the unacknowledged. And within all of this, dreams remind you of something essential. You are more complex, more layered, more emotional, and more imaginative than your waking self realizes. The dream world is not separate from you. It is you, the part of you that speaks in symbols rather than sentences, in feelings rather than facts, in imagery rather than linear thought. It is the bridge between your conscious identity and your vast subconscious interior. between who you think you are and who you truly are, between the surface of your life and the deep ocean beneath it. Dreams do not simply show you what happened yesterday. They show you how yesterday feels. They show you where your mind is growing, where it is hurting, where it is searching, where it is healing. They show you the emotional architecture of your inner world, translated into metaphor. Even nightmares, the most feared aspect of dreaming, are part of this work. They reveal wounds that need attention, emotions that need acknowledgement, fears that need integration. They are not punishments, they are invitations to heal. And the most extraordinary truth is this: no one taught the brain to do any of this. Dreaming evolved naturally, long before language, culture, or civilization. It is one of the earliest forms of inner life, a window into the origins of consciousness itself. Modern science is only just beginning to unravel the mechanics behind dreams. We are learning how the brain constructs inner worlds, how symbols arise, how emotions guide imagery, how memories reshape themselves, how neural networks reorganize during sleep. We are building technologies that can glimpse dream content, influence dream states, and support emotional healing through REM cycles. We stand at the dawn of a new era in understanding the mind's nighttime universe. But even when technology advances to the point where dreams can be decoded more precisely, the meaning of a dream will always belong to the dreamer. Because meaning is emotional. Meaning is personal. Meaning is lived, not measured. Dreams are the mind, speaking in its oldest language, the language of imagery, metaphor, intuition, and emotion. They show you truths that waking life cannot always articulate. They preserve the continuity of self across time. They help you navigate loss, love, memory, identity, fear, hope, and transformation. They help you understand what it means to be alive. And perhaps the most profound insight of all is this: dreams are not escapes from reality. They are gateways into reality, the inner reality that shapes your waking life. You carry your dreams into the day, whether you remember them or not. You carry the emotional integration, the creative insights, the softened fears, the reorganized memories. You wake each morning, slightly changed, slightly healed, slightly wiser. So when you next close your eyes and drift into that mysterious inner world, remember, you are entering the oldest theater of the mind, where consciousness plays with itself, where the self meets the shadow, where memory meets imagination, where emotion becomes story, where the mind reveals who you are, who you were, and who you are becoming. Dreams are not illusions. They are maps drawn by the night to guide you through the deepest parts of yourself.